So before we jump into what I have selected as some of Pema's key teachings, I'd like to just give you a little background for those of you who don't know her or who aren't as familiar with her as someone like me. So Pema Chödrön, of course, is her Tibetan Buddhist name, but she was actually born Deirdre Blomfield Brown. And like many women of her generation, she married young and she had 2 children in her early 20s. Unfortunately, that marriage ended in divorce. And she recounts that still hoping to live a conventional American life, she decided to remarry. And when she did, they, as a young family, moved to the west coast of the United States. And Pema began studying at the University of California, Berkeley. And sometime after graduating with a bachelor's degree in English literature, and then followed by a master's in elementary education, Pema received the devastating news that her now second husband wanted a divorce. And this being, of course, her second, what she considered failed marriage, it caused her to explore various spiritual and therapeutic treatment strategies in the hopes of healing what she describes as this immense, overwhelming, consuming emotional pain and a sense of failure. And it was during this period of searching that she discovered Buddhism and thereby meditation. And she was so intrigued by it all that she decided to leave America and study under Lama Chime Rinpoche, who was at that time a prominent Buddhist teacher, and he was in London. A while later, she returned to the US and she continued her studies in San Francisco under a new teacher, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. I do apologize to anyone who's listening to this, and I'm butchering the pronunciation. And as her knowledge and understanding of Buddhism and meditation increased, Pema began to take her practice more seriously. Of course, at this point, she's still a mother. And at 1974, at the age of 38, when she was ordained as a novice Buddhist nun, at that time, full ordination for women in that tradition was not permitted. But she eventually found a high-ranking Buddhist Lama who was so impressed by her dedication that he oversaw the full ordination process and helped her to become America's first woman in the Vajrayana Buddhist tradition. And he said it was his honor to bestow upon her becoming a fully ordained Tibetan Buddhist nun. How cool is that? And then, of course, she became known as Pema Chödrön. So I wanted to share with you 3 teachings, which, as I mentioned earlier, have sustained me personally, but also, I think, been instrumental in so much of our understanding, especially in the United States, of Tibetan Buddhism. So allow me to share you three with you. And the first one I'm going to title, Hold Your Seat. And this is something that I learned from Pema fairly early on in my own understanding and practice of Buddhism. I have to pause here and say that I'm not a Buddhist. However, like probably most of us, I've been very attracted by many of the practices and the wisdoms and the understandings of the Buddhist tradition. And I can honestly say I've incorporated many of them in my own life and in my own practice, but I'm not a Buddhist. But hold your seat has been one of those practices. And let me explain what I mean by that. Pema says, and bear with me on this, our uncomfortable feelings are pregnant with kindness. Our uncomfortable feelings are pregnant with kindness. And she urges us that before these feelings harden, or what she calls concretize, or before we run away, before the storylines, the new narratives that we often begin to tell ourselves and start to form in our minds and in our psyches, she says that we can choose to remain open and vulnerable. And here, she says, it's here that we can listen to the voice of the benevolent teacher. In other words, the pathway to peace is not through escape or trying to control our environment, as she was telling earlier about wanting to cover the world with leather. Rather, it is, she said, to turn towards the things that we fear, or the things that make us the most uncomfortable. When difficult feelings arrive, she says, pause and try. It's building a muscle. It's something that takes practice, but to try not to distract ourselves or turn to our various addictions, whatever they may be. We all have them. And instead, practice compassionate attention and compassionate patience, to feel the heat, to feel the tightness and feel the ache, and just pause and breathe. It's counterintuitive, but paradoxically, it's the pathway to peace. So in other words, not to get up from your meditation stool or your yoga mat or the place that you find yourself in, but to hold your seat and stay with it. The second thing is the truth of uncertainty. And I know these are things and are themes that we've explored before, but Pema challenges us. What if this feeling of being unsteady, unsure, groundless, turned upside down, what if this is not a mistake? What if, in fact, it's a doorway, and it's a doorway into our own awakening? What if we, at any given moment, are like the baby birds being pushed out of the nest, out of our particular comfort zone, out of what feels familiar and safe, even though it may paradoxically be places of challenge or sorrow, and to allow it to push us out of the nest. The peace that we seek doesn't come from controlling, but again, paradoxically, by letting go. And let me share a true example of this. A dear friend of mine, whose parents have both now died. The family has, as very often as we know in these cases, the family have sort of turned in on each other a little bit, haggling and arguing over the will and who gets what. And I'm sure it's a story that's familiar to all of us. And my friend is caught in the midst of this in her own family. And it's been, I think, 18 months, 18 painful months of can we, can't we, should we, shouldn't we, you can't, you can, I can, you can't. And she said to me just, I think, 10 days ago, she said, you know what? I'm tired of fighting this. I can't. She said, if I lose what I think that I'm rightfully, should rightfully be mine, so be it. I'm letting go, she said. Those were her very words. And lo and behold, don't you know, 2 or 3 days later, she gets an email from her feuding siblings to say, you know what, we're rethinking all of this, and you're right. It's yours. Have it. Take it. And she did that, and she received it after the process of letting go. And I think it's a powerful example of what Pema is trying to teach us. And then the third thing I wanted to share with you is, of course, the power of compassion. That's why we started off with the Om Mani Padme Hum, because compassion and compassion in action and compassion for ourselves is at the heart of her teachings and the heart of Tibetan Buddhism. And these are Pema's words from one of her books. Compassion is not a relationship between the healer and the wounded. It's a relationship between equals. Only when we know, accept, and befriend our own darkness and do so well can we be present with the darkness of others. Now, darkness sounds judgmental, but it's a sort of a word to mean anything, any struggles, any pains, any sorrows. Compassion, she says, becomes real when we recognize our shared humanity. In other words, we're in this mess together. Her guidance to us is meet your failing. Meet it, look at it, acknowledge it, befriend it, welcome it. Meet your failing, meet yourself and all your complexities with kindness. That's the crucible of change. And that's where the alchemy can happen. All of us, it's the human, I think the human need. All of us long to be seen, to be heard, to be acknowledged, and to be loved. And so her charge to us is, what if we started with ourselves first? What a different world perhaps we could have. So in closing, I would like to ask, what would it mean for us as non-Buddhist? I know perhaps there are some amongst us who would identify as Buddhist, but for those of us and all of our different backgrounds and experiences, what would it mean for us to walk through life the way that Pema suggests? Well, number one, I think it's to cultivate awareness and to cultivate loving, non-judgmental awareness of ourselves so that we can better understand our patterns and reactions and create space for change. As the Buddha said, awareness is the key to unlocking everything. And it's the most powerful first step that any of us can take, awareness. Number two, to walk this path with her is to make friends with and accept and acknowledge impermanence and change. We know it. And I love what she says, to lean into uncertainty. Because it's, again, paradoxical. Normally we lean against something that feels solid, but to actually lean into the fact that uncertainty is our human experience, rather than resisting it or running from it. It's there, she says, that we can find peace and acceptance in the ever-changing nature of us, our lives, our world, everything around us. And finally, the third one is to practice compassion and loving kindness. And if we do so in ourselves, it enables us to cultivate a sense of interconnectedness and overcome feelings that we all feel, if we're honest, of isolation, separation. And this in turn leads to, she argues, and she, I believe, has proven in her own practice, greater fulfillment and peace and happiness. I'd love to leave you with 3 of her quotes that I feel support all of this. The first is this: the truth that you believe and cling to makes you unavailable to hear anything new. And we can let the circumstances of our lives harden us so that we become increasingly resentful or afraid. Or we can let them soften us and make us kinder. We always have the choice. And finally, you have to let go at some point in order to move forward. Thank you, everybody.
If you like this video, please like us on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and click on the bell to be notified whenever we post a new video. Thank you.